Glaciers are not just frozen rivers of ice. They are Earth's greatest vaults of fresh water. Locked inside them is nearly 3/4 of all the fresh water on this planet. Today, they blanket about 10% of Earth's surface. But in the distant past, during the last ice age, ice ruled almost 1/3 of the world. There are two giants among glaciers. One type clings to mountains, alpine glaciers, slowly grinding their way down valleys, carving landscapes over thousands of years. The other is far more powerful: continental ice sheets. Vast, frozen blankets that bury entire regions. The largest of them all still exists today. The Lambert Glacier in Antarctica. 100 kilometers wide, 400 kilometers long, more than 2 kilometers deep. And yet, even Lambert is only a fragment of something far larger. Because Greenland and Antarctica together hold over 99% of all glacial ice on Earth. So here's the question that changes everything. What happens if it all melts? Where does that unimaginable volume of water go? What happens to the oceans, the continents, and life itself? Tonight, we imagine a future no map has ever shown. The total amount of ice on Earth is almost impossible to visualize. Between 25 and 30 million cubic kilometers. To put that into perspective, if all the planet's glaciers were packed together into a single sheet of ice, just 1 kilometer thick, it would cover an area larger than all of North America. Now imagine that ice turning to water. Not instantly, but inevitably. In 2019, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released a report that shook the scientific world. It revealed something deeply unsettling. Between 2006 and 2015, Greenland alone lost 280 billion tons of ice every single year. Smaller glaciers around the world lost almost as much, 220 billion tons annually. Even Antarctica, once thought nearly untouchable, was losing 155 billion tons per year. The oceans responded quietly but steadily. Sea level rose an average of 3.6 millimeters each year. It doesn't sound like much, until you realize climate change doesn't move smoothly. It builds pressure, then it leaps. NASA projects that global sea level could rise nearly 1 meter in the near future. But scientists have asked a darker question. What if all glaciers melted? Researchers at the University of California, Irvine, ran the numbers. If Greenland disappeared, sea levels rise 7.4 meters. If Antarctica followed 58 meters. If every glacier on Earth vanished, the oceans would rise by 65 meters, and the world map would be rewritten. Coastlines would be the first to fall. Every continent would lose land, some far more than others. Florida would vanish entirely. The Netherlands, after centuries of fighting the sea, would finally lose. Denmark would shrink. Much of Northern Europe would drown. St. Petersburg would disappear. Venice would sink for good. The Caspian Sea would finally become a true sea. The Black Sea would burst eastward, carving new straits, doubling in size. Across Asia, China would face catastrophic flooding. Vietnam and the Philippines would lose vast stretches of land. In South America, the Amazon River would no longer exist. In its place, a massive gulf, tearing open the heart of Brazil. The Paran and Uruguay rivers would become open bays. Buenos Aires would vanish, swallowed more than 100 kilometers inland. Africa would lose less land than other continents. But that would be no comfort. Rising seas would amplify heat, pushing much of the continent beyond survivable limits. Egypt would suffer deeply. Alexandria and Cairo would fall beneath the expanding Mediterranean. Australia would change too. A new inland sea would form, while much of the narrow coastal zone where millions live would disappear underwater. And then there is Antarctica, or rather, what remains of it. The familiar outline we know today is an illusion shaped entirely by ice. Strip Antarctica bare, even at today's sea level, and you don't see a continent. You see islands, dozens of them. And when all the ice melts, Antarctica becomes a flooded archipelago, broken, scattered, unrecognizable. A time traveler might still recognize Africa, the Americas, Australia, but Antarctica would be a mystery. The oceans would change too, from the inside out. Glaciers are fresh water. When they melt, they dilute the sea. Salinity drops. And that alone could trigger an ecological collapse. Many marine species depend on stable salt levels to survive. Some would vanish almost immediately. Others would explode in number, unbalancing entire ecosystems. A chain reaction would ripple through oceans and onto land. As sea levels rise, salt water would be pushed deep into groundwater, poisoning soil. Farms would fail. Irrigation would become impossible in many regions. Ocean currents would slow or stop. The Gulf Stream, which keeps northern Europe mild, could collapse. Not freezing Britain, but reshaping global climate in unpredictable ways. And there's more. Glaciers have trapped toxins for hundreds of thousands, even millions of years. Volcanic ash, chemical residues, pollutants from ancient disasters. When the ice melts, all of it is released into oceans, into the air. Permafrost would thaw too, releasing unknown chemicals, dormant bacteria, ancient viruses, even abandoned nuclear waste sites lost to chaos. Global warming would not come alone. It would amplify everything. Health crises, food shortages, water scarcity, economic collapse. A landmark study published in PNAS revealed a terrifying projection. By 2070, nearly 1/5 of Earth's land could experience average annual temperatures above 29. See the climate of the Sahara Desert. Not deserts alone, but some of the most densely populated regions on Earth. South America, India, Africa, Northern Australia, Southeast Asia. Many areas could become unlivable long before the last glacier melts. Even time itself would change. As ice melts, water shifts from the poles toward the equator. Earth's rotation would slow. The day would grow longer, not by hours, but by 10 to 20 seconds. A small change, but humanity would face far greater problems. Today, 40% of humans live within 70 meters of sea level. Entire cities would be lost. Entire nations erased. The Netherlands, Japan, island states around the world, ports would flood. Trade would collapse. Fishing industries would have to be rebuilt from scratch. Fertile land would drown. Food systems would break. Billions would be forced inland, overcrowding what remains. And yet, there is a sliver of light. As Arctic ice retreats, new sea routes would open. A northern passage between Europe and Asia, 40% shorter than the Suez Canal route. Mineral resources, long buried under ice, would become accessible. Oil, gas, copper, nickel. Greenland and Antarctica could become the last reservoirs of untapped resources. But none of this would ever balance the cost. It would only help humanity survive, not thrive. OUTRO. The story of melting glaciers is not just about ice. It is a warning, written slowly in water. What disappears at the poles reshapes life everywhere else. The oceans rise. The land retreats. And humanity is forced to adapt or fall behind. This future is not tomorrow, but it is no longer distant. Every decision made today, decides what kind of world survives tomorrow. Because once the ice is gone, there is no rewind button, only consequences. And the greatest question remains, will we change in time or become another chapter in Earth's long memory?